Crystal Howell is here to help us. As I mentioned, she is a chartered professional accountant and she is a certified internal auditor. Good morning. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Good morning, Cassandra.
So I don't, everybody doesn't want to say it and sound like they're all money hungry, but everybody would like certainly to be comfortable financially.
At the very least, you should be comfortable.
Right.
That is something you should be aiming for. No one should make you feel embarrassed about wanting or desiring financial comfort.
Yes, and you have been trying to help us do just that by, planning and noting and being very aware of what we're spending as well as what we're saving and how we can save. So we always do a little recap,
Yes.
but we promised to also look at some investment opportunities or possibilities this week.
Yes. So, our usual recap. You would have been documenting every single day, hopefully, but if you have not, at least weekly or whatever period of time you've determined, all of the money that you've spent, every single penny that you can remember or that you've jotted down, we would have accumulated that information and be able to start having an idea of where our money is going, whether it's in food, utilities, other expenses. And once we've done that, we'll be able to get an idea of the areas that we can cut so that cup of coffee does not necessarily have to go out of the window. We've also done our cash reconciliation so that we compare what we've documented to what cash we actually have in our bank accounts or in our wallets. And we look to see where the differences are to see if we've missed anything. And then we've used this information to be able to come up with our budget on how much money we have, how much we have to spend, how much our savings element will help us to reach our short and long-term goals. And we got to the point where we determined, even with all of the cutting and the contriving and the saving, you're still not getting to the saving goal that you would like.
Okay.
So now we are at the point where we're looking at investment options. And we are not going to be just looking at the traditional options like going to the bank or to Sagicor or to any other financial institution. Those are very important, but those are not the only type of investments that I'll be looking at over the series. So we'll start with those, just since those are things that people are most comfortable with. And then we'll move on to other types of investments that persons can make to help to increase their long-term spending power.
All right. So when people hear invest, they always get anxious, they get nervous, or they may think, oh, that's not for me. I don't have enough to consider myself an investor. So what do you start with? Where do you look? How do you approach this investment thing?
Well, the first thing I would say is that there's no one size fits all. The same way that there's no one cell phone that suits every single person in this world, there's no one investment vehicle that will suit every single person. So what I may invest in is not necessarily what other persons may be comfortable with. And you have to look at your financial capacity as well. And there's nothing wrong with saving until you get to the point where you may be able to make a much more substantial investment. Take your time. Recognize where you're at, recognize where your needs are. This is why it's important to document, because from the documentation over the several months or years, you would get an idea of what you are usually comfortable saving and what your outside surprise expenses may be, because they begin to normalize. Not saying that you will never ever get another surprise, but usually you will know, oh, I usually at least once or twice a year have to take my car to the mechanic. You have to have this particular expense pop up, whether it's land tax or something else. You begin to get an idea or feel it's less of a surprise and more of something that you can plan for when you minimize your expenses to the point where it is truly only surprises that will pop up and take you by surprise.
And because you've been doing your savings, you can pretty much deal with those.
Hopefully.
Seasonal.
It's not something that you do overnight, trust me. But after a couple of months or years, depending on how long it takes you to get there, you will get to the point where the surprises cause you less anxiety and you feel more comfortable being able to say, okay, this wasn't what I expected, but I have a cushion here to help me to be able to get through.
Okay. And these investments that we want to look at as well, this should help you be able to, be a little more flexible. And you mentioned saving to it as well. So again, pacing yourself.
You have to pace yourself. So most people tend to use the commercial banks or the credit unions, and there are so many commercial banks and credit union options because you have persons, for instance, if you're a teacher, you have the Barbados Union Teachers Cooperative Credit Union, you have the Barbados Public Workers Cooperative Credit Union, you have lots of options. And it's not always interest rate. That is the reason why people will go towards a particular savings option, because people sometimes like flexibility. What if the closest entity to you is 5 minutes away and you like that ability to have that convenience, or you purposely like it far because you don't want to always have the ability to pop in and take it off the bank or the ATM machine. You want to be able to look at those other things. You want to look at, if I've had a relationship with this financial institution, would it then lead to me having an easier time getting a mortgage or other investment options without having to go through all of the trouble of starting over another relationship? And some people take the time to look at what is being offered so that they can say, I may not be able to afford this now, but later on down the road, when I've built a long enough history of this institution, I should have an easier time moving into the other investment options that they have.
Okay, let's talk about some of them. So if you've decided you've got your whatever kind of premium savings account and you want to do a little more, maybe pension. Can people look at pension as a source of
planning
investment?
is something,
Endowment
yes.
plans. What?
All of those options are, by the way, offered by Sagicor. Disclaimer, I do work there.
Shameless plug.
I will do the shameless plugging. There are other financial institutions that offer these, but I will always push Sagicor. They have endowment plans. They have pension plans. You have term deposits as well, too, which is something a lot of people like to start with because it's easy to understand and it's easy to get into. And depending on which institution you go to, you have Globe, you have Signia, you have a lot of different places that you can go to that can start you off on a term deposit that has a better interest rate than your usual savings account. The catch, though, is you have to be willing to keep a certain amount of money
on that
for a certain period of time. So some will start at, say, a year. And you have to be comfortable that this money that you're going to put on this term deposit, you can do without for a year.
Okay.
So this is why I said it's important to document and to plan, because you will look and see, well, for the last year, I have been able to save, I thought I was going to be able to save 500, but I've only ever been consistent with 300. So if I'm going to do a term deposit, it may not be a good idea to start with 500 and then I am in trouble later on because I feel as though I need to break it.
So go with a lower amount, but add more if you can.
Add more if you can, because then you can be comfortable that if something happens, you're not going to break that term, so that you would not have to incur the penalties that sometimes come with these options.
Okay, so term deposit is something for that person looking for another type of investment to note. Endowments.
Now, the endowment plan, Sagicor had one about, this is 2019. Yes. They would have had one where you would have had different time periods and it would have been for a much longer time period. So there was one
10,
where you could,
15,
25 years. And you would have decided, this is the one that I want to invest in, and you will be putting down a particular set of money every month. And this here tends to call for a much bigger commitment because you have 10 years is a long time. And anything can happen in 10, 15, 25 years that could change your financial circumstances. So again, we recommend caution. This is usually geared towards younger people, not saying that older persons can't, but younger persons tend to have an increase in income as they go through their lifespan, which means it will become more comfortable for them as time goes by to be saying goodbye to this particular set of money. And you usually have a much bigger payback at the end of the period because you would have put down the money for such a long period of time. So that's something else that you will want to look at.
Okay. Well, you wanted to continue with the point?
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just going to say, so what about, how does that compare to, say, an insurance policy in terms of an investment, a life insurance policy?
The insurance policies, it depends on what you want. So you have a term policy where you would invest a particular set of money so that you can have, in case something goes wrong, some assurance that this particular expense will be covered. There are some with a cash value,
Yes.
which means if you put this particular money in, not only will they help you if you run into trouble, but you will also have a cash element that you can borrow against, or that you can have a loan, or you can have that savings element, so that it's not just you putting money towards this term plan, but you also have the option to get some cash back. Of course, it's a bit more expensive. So
Yeah.
persons who can only afford to make sure they cover expenses, potential future expenses, some may go for the term, but if you have the cash to be able to go for the cash value, some persons prefer to have the other options.
Yeah, and that could be used for education as well.
can be.
You know, for your children if they're growing.
Or a deposit for a home. There are lots
Something major.
of exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's pause for a cause right here. We are speaking with Crystal Howell. She is a certified internal auditor, chartered professional accountant. We're looking at managing those pennies and giving you some advice on how you can invest for the years to come so you have that kind of financial comfort you're looking for. But as we continue our conversation with Crystal Howell, remember we're looking at investment opportunities. So you were about to tell us about some other options that people can look at that are attainable just as long as you recognize what it is you can handle and stick with.
Yes. So, again, the same way that you invest your time to make sure that you purchase the correct cell phone, I encourage persons to do the research before they get into any of these investment options, because you don't want it to feel as though I heard that this is something good to invest in, and I went and I put my money in it, and it's not performing the way that I expected, or it's really a financial burden on me because I can't maintain it. So I really do encourage persons, Google is your friend. If you have any questions, go to the financial institution, ask all of the hard questions, because of course they're going to be trying to sell you a product, but you have to make sure that you go to an institution that has your best interests at heart and that will look at your circumstances and be able to recommend what is right for you. That's why a lot of persons try to go to a financial advisor, but it's not always feasible for persons to go to a financial advisor for every single thing in their life. So if you wanted to go and invest in a term deposit, a mutual fund, an endowment plan, an insurance policy, always make sure that you understand, how is this going to affect my life? How is this going to impact my budget? Am I going to be able to afford it? Is the risk or the reward worth it? And we get more into the risk versus the reward, because everybody likes to talk about the reward, but nobody likes to talk about the risk.
Okay. How do people look at purchasing shares? The average citizen who wants,
Barbadians are
not into that,
not
and maybe
into
it's
it.
that they have a fear and they don't get how to do it.
I don't know if it's maybe they don't understand, or maybe they see that the activity on the market is not where they would like it to be. But the Barbados Stock Exchange is an option for you to be able to go and say, I would like to go and purchase shares in any of these companies that you see on their stock exchange.
And again, you can get that listing for the cost and what each company's shares are going at.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if there's an initial public offering, which I think the last one, I could be wrong, would have been One Caribbean Media. That was a while ago. But if you can get in from the beginning of a company and be able to see your investment grow, again, there's always a risk. The company could grow, the company could fail. This is why I recommend not putting all of your eggs in one basket.
Diversify.
You have to diversify. This is why people like mutual funds, because mutual funds tends to be an investment in a whole group of companies, as opposed to you taking a risk with one company that may or may not do well. It may surprise you and it's fantastic, and you be able to either sell your shares and make a profit, or the dividends that you have, you get a nice dividend. But with a mutual fund, you spread that risk amongst a lot of companies and with a lot of other investors, so that you won't feel those big hits or those big misses.
Yeah. So if you are looking at other options, other types of savings or investment, and you want to move beyond just putting it on a credit union or a bank, you have the option also of mutual funds. But you can also make the Barbados Stock Exchange your friend. I'm sure that if you call, you will get the advice that you need and you ask the right questions, write them down and go prepared.
Yes.
I think that this is a perfect opportunity for you to give a takeaway tip as we go prepare and continue into this month.
I like to remind persons of the last takeaway tip, which is to document, document, document. But the one for this toss is to always investigate. Do your homework. Do not rely on what was good for somebody else because it may not be the right product for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Crystal Howell. She is a chartered professional accountant and certified internal auditor, helping us to manage those pennies. You want to turn it into a lot more pennies, so do the right things.